Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into the mind of someone who, well, literally flipped our view of the universe on its head.
He really did. We're talking about Nicolaus Copernicus.
Exactly. And his big idea, the heliocentric theory, but it's not just that, is it? There's this whole other side to him. Physician, economist.
Absolutely. A true Renaissance man. And we've dug into, historical accounts, academic work, even his own writings to piece this together.
Right. So our mission today is basically to give you the essential Copernicus, not just what he found, but why it was such a big deal, why people pushed back so hard, and just how wide-ranging his talents were.
It's a fascinating story. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, so who was Nicolaus Copernicus? Born 1473, Torun, Poland. We call him the father of modern astronomy.
And that's mainly for saying, hey, maybe the Earth isn't the center of everything. Maybe it's the sun.
A pretty radical thought for the time. And his early life, it seems like it set him up for this kind of thinking. He came from a merchant family, pretty well off.
Yes, youngest of four. But his father died when he was young, maybe around 10 years old.
Yeah, about that. And that's when his uncle steps in. Lucas Watson Road.
A really key figure. Watson Road was highly educated. He later became a bishop, and he basically took over Copernicus's upbringing and education. Made sure he got the best.
And best is an understatement. His academic path was, well, extensive.
It really was. Started at the University of Krakow Liberal Arts, astronomy, astrology too, which was common then.
Then off to Italy, right, like many scholars of the time.
Exactly. Studied law, specifically canon law and medicine, Bologna, Padua. Eventually got his doctorate in canon law from Ferrara in 1503.
Okay, quick aside, canon law. What is that exactly for listeners?
Basically, it's the internal legal system of the Catholic Church. Laws, regulations, how the church governs itself.
So that training must have given him skills in logic, argument.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Building systems, reasoning things through. You can see how that might apply to, say, reorganizing the solar system.
And even while studying law and medicine in Italy, he was still doing astronomy.
He was. He actually lived with Domenico Maria de Novara in Bologna, who was the head astronomer there, and helped him with observations. The interest was clearly already deep.
So all these different fields, law, medicine, classics, astronomy, it wasn't just degree collecting. How did that breadth feed into his big idea?
I think it was absolutely crucial. The legal training gave him precision. Medicine required sharp observation, thinking about systems.
Right.
And reading the classics, it wasn't just about absorbing ancient wisdom. It was about maybe seeing old ideas that had been overlooked or questioning the dominant interpretations, like Aristotle's. It gave him a unique toolkit.
Okay, so let's paint a picture of the world before Copernicus started questioning things. What was the standard view of the cosmos?
For, centuries, the absolute dominant view was the Ptolemaic system, geocentric.
Meaning Earth-centered, stationary Earth right in the middle of everything.
Exactly. And everything else, moon, sun, planets, stars, revolved around us.
How did they make that work with what they actually saw in the sky? Because planets do weird things, like move backwards sometimes.
Right, retrograde motion. Ptolemy's system was incredibly clever, mathematically complex. It used devices like epicycles, planets moving on little circles.
Which themselves moved on bigger circles, the difference.
Precisely. And then there were equants, these sort of offset points to make the speeds look right. It was ingenious, in a way, designed to fit the observations to the theory.
It sounds really complicated.
It was.
Yeah.
But it worked mathematically for prediction. And it wasn't just math. It fit with philosophy, Aristotle's physics of a heavy, immobile Earth.
And religion, too.
Very much so. People pointed to Bible verses, like Joshua telling the sun to stand still. If the sun could be told to stand still, it must normally move, right? And Earth must be stationary.
So it was a whole worldview, not just a scientific model. Why did it last so long, despite the complexity?
Well, inertia plays a part, sure. But it also gave humanity a central place, which fit philosophically and theologically. And honestly, it did provide a workable model for predicting positions, which was important for astrology and navigation. The complexity wasn't necessarily seen as a flaw back then.
Until Copernicus comes along. So how did his idea start?
It seems he first sketched it out privately in a short manuscript called the Commentariolus, the Little Commentary, sometime between maybe 1508 and 1514.
And he just shared it with friends, not published.
Right, very cautiously. Shared it with a few people he trusted.
And the core idea, radically simple in a way.
Radically simple, profoundly disruptive. Sun at the center. Earth is just another planet orbiting the sun.
And Earth isn't stationary either.
No. He argued our daily view of the sun rising and setting. That's the Earth spinning on its axis.
And the seasons?
That came from a tilt in Earth's axis combined with its orbit. He actually proposed a sort of third motion, a wobble, to make it all work geometrically in his system.
But this must have immediately raised huge questions, like, if the Earth is whipping around the sun and spinning, why don't we fly off? Why do things fall straight down?
Exactly. Those were major objections, and frankly, Copernicus didn't have great answers based on the physics of his day. That would come later with Galileo and Newton.
And he didn't get everything right either, did he? He still held on to some old ideas.
That's a key point. He was revolutionary, but still a product of his time. He couldn't shake the ancient Greek idea that celestial movements must be perfect circles.
But planetary orbits aren't perfect circles.
They're not. They're ellipses, as Kepler later showed. Because Copernicus insisted on circles, he actually had to keep using epicycles in his own system to make the observed positions match his model.
So his system was complex too, almost like Ptolemy's in some ways.
In terms of the number of circles involved, yes, it was still quite complex, which is ironic. The real leap wasn't necessarily mathematical simplicity at first.
It was the conceptual shift, taking Earth out of the center.
That was the earth-shattering part, demoting Earth to just another planet. That was the fundamental break with centuries of tradition.
And he also thought the sun was the center of the whole universe, not just our solar system.
Yes, he didn't grasp the sheer scale of the universe beyond the planets. And, as we said, elliptical orbits were still to come. Kepler fixed that in 1609.
Still, even with those limitations, it was a massive blow to the old Aristotelian science.
A huge blow. It really cracked the foundations and, helped kickstart what we call the scientific revolution.
So he has this revolutionary idea. He writes the Commentariolis early on, but his big book on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres doesn't come out until much, much later. Why the delay?
He finished the main work, De Revolutionibus, around 1530, but he hesitated for, nearly his whole life after that.
Sort of criticism.
Almost certainly. From fellow scholars, astronomers, but also, importantly, from the church. He even wrote in the book itself that mathematics is written for mathematicians, maybe hoping to limit the audience, avoid wider controversy.
So what finally pushed him to publish?
A young mathematician named Georg Joachim Rheticus, he came from Wittenberg, became Copernicus' student in 1539, was blown away by the theory.
Rheticus wrote a summary first, right? The Narratio Prima.
He did, and he really, really pushed Copernicus, persuaded him to finally let the full book be printed.
But then comes this weird twist with the preface.
Ah, yes. The preface by Andreas Osiander. Rheticus had overseen the start of the printing in Nuremberg, but had to leave. He handed it off to Osiander, a Lutheran theologian.
And Osiander added his own preface. Anonymously.
Yes, without Copernicus' permission, apparently. And this preface basically said, look, this heliocentric stuff, it's just a mathematical model, a hypothesis. It helps with calculations, but don't take it as physical reality.
Trying to soften the blow for critics, appease the philosophers and theologians.
Exactly. But Copernicus' supporters, like Rheticus, were furious. They saw it as a betrayal, watering down the revolutionary claim that this was how the universe actually was.
So the book finally comes out in 1543. What was the immediate reaction? Was it explosive?
It varied. Among Protestants, leaders like Martin Luther reacted quickly and negatively. Luther famously called Copernicus that fool trying to turn astronomy upside down and pointed to the Joshua story.
Philip Melanchthon, too.
Melanchthon also condemned it, even suggested it should be suppressed by authorities.
What about the Catholic side? Was it immediately hostile?
Initially, it was more mixed. Some high-ranking figures, even Pope Clement years earlier, had apparently heard about the idea and seemed interested, even encouraging. Cardinal Schönberg wrote to Copernicus, urging him to publish.
But that didn't last.
No. Critics soon emerged, like Dominicans Bartolomeo Spina and Giovanni Tolosani. They argued it wasn't scientifically proven, contradicted scripture, and that math shouldn't dictate physics.
And eventually the church did ban it.
Yes. The Vatican formally placed a Revolutionibus on the Index of Forbidden Books in 1616, mainly in the context of the Galileo affair. Though, interestingly, the ban wasn't fully lifted until 1835.
Wow, 1835. That's a long time, but Spain never banned it.
Apparently not the Spanish Inquisition. It shows how enforcement and reaction could differ regionally.
So despite the eventual revolution it caused, acceptance was really slow.
Incredibly slow. 60 years after publication, maybe only 15 astronomers in Europe actually supported Copernicanism. It had competition too, like Tycho Brahe's hybrid model, where planets orbited the sun, but the sun still orbited a stationary Earth.
So it needed more work, more evidence.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It really took Kepler figuring out the elliptical orbits in 1609.
And Galileo popularizing it with his telescope observations, even though it got him into huge trouble.
Right. And then finally, Isaac Newton, late 17th century, providing the underlying physics with his laws of gravity and motion. That's what cemented the heliocentric view almost universally.
Which brings up that myth about the book itself, the idea that nobody read it.
Yeah, that persisted for a long time. But the historian Owen Gingerich did this amazing project, tracking down and examining almost every surviving copy of the first two editions.
And what did he find?
He found tons of handwritten notes in the margins, annotations, calculations, comments. It proved the book was being read, studied, wrestled with by scholars across Europe right from the start, even if they didn't all agree with it immediately. It definitely wasn't ignored.
Okay, so we focus heavily on the astronomy, obviously. But you mentioned earlier he was much more than just an astronomer, a polymath. Let's talk about his other roles, like being a physician.
Yes, and he wasn't just dabbling. He was a respected, practicing physician for much of his adult life. He served as physician to his uncle, the bishop, treated his own brother Andreas, who sadly had leprosy,
His leprosy.
and looked after other canons and church officials.
And there's this mention of his altruism, caring for the poor.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Sources say he paid special attention to the poor, giving them free medical advice and medicines. There's even that touching story about the townspeople engraving a poem on the Frombork water system he likely helped design, saying his wisdom gave them what nature denied.
That suggests real respect from the community. Did he consult more widely, too?
He did. There's a famous case where he was called in to treat a high-ranking counselor to Duke Albert of Prussia, Georg von Kuenheim, who was gravely ill.
Even though Duke Albert had been an enemy during the war with the Teutonic Knights.
Exactly. It shows his reputation transcended political divides. Copernicus had actually directed the defense of Volstein Castle against the Duke's forces earlier in his life.
What was his medical approach like? We think of him as this rational scientist.
It was a blend, typical of the time, but maybe with his own rational bent. He used standard authorities, like Avicenna for drugs, herbal remedies based on Dioscorides.
Okay, standard stuff.
But then, some prescriptions got quite elaborate. Things containing powdered gold, silver, emerald, sapphires, coral.
Whoa, really? Gold and jewels as medicine, alongside things like cloves and honey.
Yeah, it sounds strange to us.
Hmm.
But belief in the efficacy of precious substances was common. What's maybe more telling is what he avoided. Sources suggest he steered clear of really dubious ingredients common then, like urine or certain animal parts.
Okay, so still grounded for his time, even with the emeralds. It shows the limits of even a revolutionary mind within its historical context.
Precisely. He was applying reason, but within the framework of 16th century medical knowledge.
And beyond medicine, economics, that seems like a jump.
It does, but it fit with his administrative roles. He was a canon, essentially a church administrator, for the chapter of Warmia. This involved managing estates, finances,
Oh.
and in 1526 he wrote a study on monetary reform, monete cudende ratio. In it, he laid out ideas about the quantity theory of money, basically.
Right.
More money in circulation can lead to higher prices, inflation.
He spotted inflation dangers back then.
He did, even earlier, around 1517, and he formulated a version of what we now call Gresham's Law,
Which is?
the idea that bad money drives out good. If you have debased coins circulating alongside coins with higher precious metal content, people will hoard the good stuff and spend the bad stuff, making the bad money dominate. Very insightful for the time.
So, astronomer, doctor, economist, administrator, castle defender, it's quite the resume.
It really is. A life deeply engaged with the practical and intellectual challenges of his era.
How did it all end for him?
He died on May 24, 1543, at the age of 70, probably a stroke. And there's that famous, maybe legendary story that the first printed copy of De Revolutionibus was brought to him on his deathbed.
A poignant image, seeing his life's work realized right at the end. What about his burial? Was it grand?
No, apparently not. He was buried, as was common then, in an unmarked grave somewhere beneath the floor of Frombork Cathedral.
Unmarked, so they didn't know where he was.
For centuries, no. Archaeologists searched many times. It became a long-standing mystery.
But they found him eventually.
Yes, quite recently. A team started a new search in 2004. In 2005, they identified a skull they believed was his.
How could they be sure?
Through DNA. They managed to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skull and teeth and matched it to DNA from hairs found in a calendar book that had belonged to Copernicus.
That's incredible. Forensic science solving a centuries-old mystery.
It really is. And so, in 2010, Copernicus was finally given a proper hero's funeral and reburied in Frombork Cathedral, this time under a marked tombstone showing his heliocentric model.
A fitting end to that part of the story. So summing up his legacy, it's immense, obviously.
Immense. He truly did turn the view of the world upside down. That phrase, the Copernican Revolution, it signifies not just an astronomical shift, but a fundamental change in how humanity saw its place in the cosmos.
Laying the groundwork for modern science.
Absolutely. For Kepler, Galileo, Newton, the whole scientific revolution owes him a massive debt.
And we still remember him today in many ways.
Oh, definitely. NASA named an orbiting astronomical observatory Copernicus. Element 112 on the periodic table is Copernicium.
A star too, right? 55 Cancri A.
That's right, now officially named Copernicus. Plus, countless universities, science centers, monuments, especially in Poland. And his book, De Revolutionibus, is on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register. His impact endures.
When you think about it, one person, driven by curiosity across so many different fields, astronomy, medicine, economics, managing to challenge centuries of accepted wisdom, it's pretty profound. What does his story make you think about reflecting on it now?
It really highlights the power of, I guess, intellectual breadth. How sometimes the biggest breakthroughs don't come from hyper-specialization, but from seeing connections others miss, from daring to ask, what if, even when everyone else thinks the answer is obvious.
Yeah. Maybe it encourages us all to keep that broad curiosity alive, right? To keep asking those what if questions about the world around us, just like Copernicus did.